Yeah.
Perfect. Awesome. So Aaron and I got to meet, a year and a half ago, about when I was back in a company called Chronogolf. We were a startup of about 20, 25 people in Montreal, and we were trying to scale, obviously, different sales channels, but we were solely an inbound-based company, had a bit of, pure sales by existing reps doing field sales, so nothing really scalable. And Guillaume, actually, who was my boss at the time, co-founder and CEO of Chronogolf, said, "Look, we got to look into new ways of generating revenue." And we both read your book, obviously, one of your books, and we said, "Okay, we got to bring Aaron on board. We got to, sort of see or understand the way he sees, the next phase of Chronogolf and how we can actually grow at a predictable pace." And obviously, we had investors, we had growth to sort of show, and that's when we actually decided to take the leap and have Aaron join. Aaron, if you want to share your view of that, be cool. But that was really the first time where we actually met.
Yeah, no, I remember you guys I don't remember how long you've been building the Outbound team at that point. 6 months, 12 months?
Yeah, probably 6 months. 4
months.
4 to 6 months.
Yeah, I think it was more like, hey, come in and just make sure that we're not missing any big things. And I remember, and we've got that assessment report someplace. And I remember that in general, I was like, yeah, you guys are on the right track. You kind of have the right people in a lot of the right directions. And there's always so many things that are never all right with Outbound.
Yeah.
But you kind of had some early momentum, right? And it's different than a lot of companies that have tried Outbound and there's like no momentum and it's just not working. So,
exactly.
And a good team, just a good head on your shoulders.
Yeah. So
by the way, and honestly, a lot of the success there was Chronogolf and Guillaume had put you in charge or you were doing the Outbound. And I remember, had you been doing inbound lead response before? Or?
I actually started doing inbound, and then we got to the point probably 6 months into it that we needed more volume. So that's where we started to explore. And initially I was doing outbound, but very quickly we realized we needed to add bodies, and that's pretty much when we decided to bring on a bigger team. And obviously we needed a bit of guidance through that, and that's when we decided to bring you on board.
Yeah. So I will say, if people here are listening and you have outbound team thinking about it, Alexis was a very capable implementer. I don't know, call it executor, like in charge of it. And, he was very junior. And so when they promoted him or gave him more responsibility, it really worked for him. I think that really is, there's like 3 big risks in outbound. First is market risk. Is it a good fit or not? Are you commoditized, et cetera? So it's like kind of nailing a niche. The second is execution risk. Is the person you have in charge of making sure it works, are they capable, right? And the third is management expectations. And like having someone who's very capable, like in Alexis, and makes a huge difference. So that was something they did right. It wasn't about trying to hire someone, actually in your case, with a bunch of experience outside. They just found someone internally who had some skills in terms of getting things done and some more responsibility.
And that was a really cool case study, and that's actually something we're gonna touch on.
Yeah, we have a case study. I forgot about that.
Yeah. So I'm actually gonna touch on that specifically, how, seeing myself take a lot of initiative early on, and the model of hiring and promoting from within and trying to get senior people, but also from within who already have that, brand at heart and willing to scale that team, is also something that was extremely powerful for us at Chronogolf. So we actually, a few months later, we luckily were acquired by Lightspeed. Lightspeed's a big point of sale company, worldwide company, but also based in Montreal. So we got acquired back in May of 2019 by them, and took a few months to sort of understand and get my feet wet, and the team got their feet wet in terms of seeing how it operates at such a bigger scale, and what can we as a team and a much smaller team bring to the table in a much bigger company. And that's where I sort of started to gather findings of stuff that didn't necessarily apply from a startup to an established company. And that, when I was chatting with Aaron, we realized that there are similarities, but there are a lot of things that are extremely different, much more challenging. Some stuff is obviously easier, but some stuff is much more difficult when you join something that's much bigger, that, there's more people to maneuver, there's more stuff to scale, there's more systems. Yeah,
We'll get to that.
That's a big part.
Sore spot for him.
Yeah, that's a big part of what I'm going to talk about. But yeah, so as of today, I was mandated to sort of scale a team within Lightspeed. Lightspeed was a purely sort of inbound based company, a few other channels, but mandated to sort of take on Outbound and sort of scale the team internally and get the model that we had in Chronogolf replicated throughout the funnel, actually.
Yeah. So that's, just Lightspeed was about 90 million in revenue ish, or last year.
Yeah, last reported revenue was 91 million at the last earnings call.
Tons of point of sale, tons of restaurants, hotels, bought Chronogolf for more probably the golf course. So that's the kind of business, and most of it had been driven by inbound.
Exactly.
But inbound. At some point, you need inbound and outbound, whether you start with one or the other.
Yeah, and Chronogolf, what was cool about it is that we already sold Lightspeed, so we sold both on the retail side and restaurant side, because golf courses usually tend to sell, multiple products. So they were much bigger deal sizes. So the acquisition of Chronogolf was basically the first time Lightspeed really went up market for an entire business unit, and bigger deal sizes, longer sales cycles, and more people maneuvering a single customer than they had initially experienced. So that was a bit of a learning for them, as well as it was for us, to sort of how we blend into those teams and how we implement that team into Lightspeed, because it's much different, the way they measure, the way we used to execute, and the way we sort of blended into that. So that also helped to sort of guide how we needed to launch more of a mid-market outbound team, if you will, in that established company afterwards. Cool. So as of today, we got to the point where we have two teams internationally doing outbound. So one in the UK, one in North America, and we're obviously in the early phases. But a lot of the stuff that I'm already experiencing with maneuvering systems, tools, people, recruitment, HR, across the board, I've noticed a lot of things that I think people can benefit from if either they're acquired by a company, if they're hired to scale something similar, to create something similar, regardless of what the mandate is. If you've done that at the smaller scale and now you're mandated to do it on a bigger scale, there are a lot of things that you need to know that don't necessarily apply the same way, and knowing that upfront may help a lot of people either decide as management to experience to go after that, or as executors to know what and how to maneuver people and structures. Cool. So a few big topics that Aaron and I are gonna cover. Product market fit, nailing a niche is you would think that this is
painful,
easy, but
why? What?
Well, within an established company, people may think that a lot of the niches are already set up, but depending on the channels that they were using, they might realize that they're spread really thin across a bunch of different markets and industries.
Yeah, and I think it's like once you're growing, you kind of assume everyone knows who you are. People should just know, and you kind of forget how many people don't know you.
Exactly. And people tend to not really dive super deep within a niche or a market subset. And, the ideal customer profile exercise could very well be done by a bigger company because they might think that it's already done, but sometimes they can go so far deeper within a vertical or within a market subset that they don't realize that the huge opportunities that may lie within those subsets based on their product offering. So that's something that I feel is super important to cover. Obviously, systems and tools, that's going to be a heated one. Recruitment, promoting from within, and I would say the biggest one is managing expectations and showing early KPIs. Within an established company, you either have investors, a board, people asking for very quick return on investment. So how do you manage, considering, Aaron, you say it so well that it can take 8, 12, 18 months to show some results. So how do you maneuver that, right? So
And honestly, Colin Cadmus, I did a webinar with him. He was VP of sales or CRO at a company called Aircall. This is probably like a month ago. He said it might take 3 years, but that's, I think, in a commoditized or really challenging market. So, I mean, there's a whole range. But like you put up here, so this the top 3 risks: product market, nailing a niche, right? You got that. Manage expectations, got that. And the third is the capability of the person leading the project. Those
Exactly.
are the big 3.
Exactly. And that's something that's coming up as well in one of the structure slides that I put together. But I think I'm actually going to jump to that right away because I think it's super important. I think it's one of the first points to really iron out is who's accountable for decisions and who's measured within a startup as opposed to an established company, and all the really important steps. And that's more on the system side. So I'm gonna jump straight to that, and then we can probably come back to the nailing a niche component later. Mm-hmm. But obviously,
right. It's like that ownership is so key.
Yeah.
Can you get things done or not? I like this one.
Yeah, and the way the power of the people being mandated changes everything in the way it's being executed, right? So your C-levels, your founders is obviously usually people within the startup who are going to be mandated to create or scale an outbound team. And that's really cool because it leads to having ownership and simple execution when it comes to ability to change systems roadmaps, make updates. You oftentimes are the own admin of either your Salesforce, HubSpot, whatever it is you're using. So you can just go in yourself and make those edits like Guillaume and I did so many times. And it's very simple that way. Or, if you need additional tools, or if you need, something to integrate with your CRM when it comes to data or lead generation or down the funnel, other stuff that you may need to gather feedback, you're the owner. It's simple. You can execute quickly. And the last point is on that exact point. How quickly can you execute? I put days or weeks, but it can also be hours if you're working on something.
So one thing that's not on here, which is an example, is a startup. You have like a small customer database, like kind of getting an outside data or database and then merging it. Simple.
Yeah.
If you're an established company with a really big and broad customer database, it is so painful to dedupe, merge, bound. Like, how do you kind of your data strategy with where the prospects go and how they fit in the systems, and it just gets complicated. It's like that's one of the biggest problems, is that kind of how do you get the data in or not? How do you do with it today? And then how do you maintain it over time? It just gets uglier.
It's a great point. And when you compare the startup efficiency to an established company, and the positions usually mandated to do that, a bit similar to myself, right? You're an SDR manager or director level, or you're sometimes a team lead, or even as an SDR himself can be mandated to try and make a few cold calls left and right. Obviously, this is not the way to go, but you'll often see those as projects within the business and not necessarily a direction of the business taking, okay, we got to do corporate sales or corporate development or outbound. We got to take this route of going up market and bringing customers on board. You'll just see it as a random project that some lower tiered employees can execute on it. It's not necessarily a bad thing. It's more so that the power of that person is much lower, right? You have little impact over a systems roadmap. You can't really tell the IS team to execute on something that you want like within days or hours. It takes a long time, and you oftentimes need to build a business case. You need to justify budget, so you need to either get a free trial of that and show really quickly that it is worth it and you can justify that budget. But then to get it implemented, it can take months. To either I put a year plus, but it can be 2 years depending on how tailored to the existing way of selling was, and if it's really far away from where you want it to be, the systems team can take a year to 2 years to 3 years to execute and bring the CRM to where it should be. Yeah,
as we're referring to system pains.
Yeah. So back to the product market fit, and something that you just mentioned, actually. So like using existing data within a startup and doing it within an established company. What's cool about an established company is you have access to raw data, and the data may not be as as structured as it may be within a startup where you control data integrity and you control the execution. But you still have access to analysts, you have access to a data team, you have access to a lot of people who can do it for you, and you can actually get that quite quickly. But I would say the first three things that are really important is, and Aaron, you did that so well with us, is just telling us to analyze our data, analyze our unit economics. So look at our deal size, look at conversion rates, look at market subsets, and trying to come out with 1 to 2 initial profiles, initial ideal customer profiles or niches that are basically subsets of markets that you're doing well into. And don't spread too thin initially with sort of spreading wide and trying to talk to a variety of people too early that you're not going to see a lot of success to. So look at churn, look at conversion rates, look at deal size, and come up with those 2 profiles that are really tailored to the initial outbound and for your reps to be extremely knowledgeable of, and having a direct understanding of those people is key. And the third thing actually is refining your ideal customer profile and pivot if you need to. If you see that your initial 2 or 3 niches were not necessarily good for outbound, and if it was inbound success and you realize that outbound is not necessarily working as well, you need to refine that. So it does add a level of complexity where your teams need to, on top of building a formula and on top of growing, they need to always make sure that they're working on the right profiles and refining this ideal customer profile over time. And the last point on that is inbound does not necessarily represent outbound success. And Aaron, you said that really well initially when we met, that you can't really base yourself solely on what data or existing data is telling you. You always have to refine and analyze and make sure that you're assessing and improving your ideal customer profile over time. That was really, really helpful.
Yep, that and because again, seeds, nets, and spears, your inbound ideal customer and metrics and sales cycles and deal sizes and so will probably be all different than your outbound ones.
Yeah,
might be the same, but you have to expect the outbound will be a much more targeted, specific type of customer with slower sales cycles, lower conversion rates, and that's why the deal sizes have to be bigger too.
Mm-hmm.
So
exactly.
Which is different.
And actually, an exercise that I did that actually Guillaume taught me is how do you come up with the proper formula? And he basically went on Excel and he started throwing random numbers of like deal size, conversion rates based on how we were already performing in that field. And you basically come up with your, it's the LTV over CAC, but basically your return on investment ratio of like, what's your deal size? And what's the churn looking like, and what's the lifetime value of that customer over your cost of acquisition of the team. And you sort of start to play around and analyze and come up with, okay, well, the deal size I need to be the floor is probably around 4 to 5 to 600 MRR or monthly recurring revenue. And you sort of identify where your first type of customer needs to lie and where you need to start for also the math to make sense, because product market fit is one thing, but if the math at the end of the day doesn't make sense and it's not bringing enough ROI, then you're just basically adding a revenue stream, but it's not cost efficient.
Yeah, it's usually with outbound, like a common mistake is people focus on the number of meetings, and more meetings are better, more deals are better, more leads are better, more of this, that, the other, and it's really not. I mean, you do need activity levels, but it's about better is fewer, bigger, better. That's the way to make more money through outbound, not just trying to crank up more and more meetings. Exactly.
And something that I'm going to touch on a bit further up is how, as you scale your team, start to understand more throughout the funnel and the relationship with the account execs and the feedback that they give you, and how to remove as much friction as possible with that handshake that's happening between your sales reps and your account executives, and how to get that communication to be really tight. Can be challenging considering they're used to getting really warm leads, and now your team is starting to give them colder leads that are not converting as much. How do you keep them on the same page and updated with your efforts and keep them excited for what's coming and the volume that's going to come up when all they really want to do is hit their target?
I've got an interloper. Hi, Bella.
Hey there.
My 3-year-old. She loves to invade. I'm not done yet. She's whispering, "When are you done?"
I have to steal your dad for another half hour there.
So the other thing is, if you do have a very inbound driven culture, reactive culture, and I know Jason Lemkin from Impossible, co-author, talked about this, it's great. Inbound leads are great. Love them. How could you not love them? But the point you become dependent on them is the problem. And that example is if you're starting new outbound motion for the first time, rather than trying to like give a bunch of outbound leads to just salespeople, you really want to pick a small number of salespeople to partner with if you can. And sometimes, they have to be capable and open to it and understand the differences and be ready to be adaptable. Not all salespeople are. And sometimes it makes sense to have, 1 or 2 dedicated to doing just outbound. So they can really work closely with that team to kind of figure out the process before it gets spread to more salespeople who are juggling both inbound appointments and outbound. And
could not agree more. Yeah, it's a good point. Aaron, by the way, how do you want to go about the questions? Do you want to open them up as we go, or do you prefer at the end we just get a bunch?
I would just tell people we're going to have time for questions. So there's a questions button, which is better than trying to throw them in the chat. So I actually throw it out there. I'd be curious, and you can answer this in the chat, which is how many people are at a larger company or going to doing outbound, not. I'm sure there's lots of people here just who are interested, but if you're at a larger company, be curious to throw just a hi in the chat. But otherwise, throw questions into the question box.
Awesome. I can't see that right now, so let me know if people comment that over on the chat, and I'm curious to see how many of them are actually part of that bigger company, and either a startup that's looking to be acquired that they think they can potentially have either that problem or that opportunity show up. That I'm really curious as well.
Yeah, and I'll mention, yes, we're recording it. We'll be able to share this with people. Then you can reshare it with your team as you wish. All right.
Awesome. Cool. So anything you want to add, Aaron, from your own experience based on the product market fit, nailing the niche, and I'll come back to the systems and a couple of things I want to iron out on that side, but anything more from what you see on there that you think is a very important takeaway?
Yeah. So I say these days, it's just reminding people too, it's not, niche doesn't just mean like market segment, like finance or hotels. Nailing niche really also means learning how to think like your customer so you can communicate in their language. It's about having that connection between you and the right customer so that okay, if the companies who are the most likely to purchase are hotels, a multi-chain hotels with at least 10 locations, but not more than 50 based in these regions, Okay, what are their problems? Like being able to read their minds to understand what it's like to be in their shoes so that when you do reach out to them through whatever mediums, you can talk like them, you can sound like them, you can understand them.
Yeah,
that's really
for messaging.
For messaging and just for prioritizing, understand, because the biggest waste of time and energy and money in outbound is targeting the wrong companies or the wrong people at the right companies, whether it's at the program level, at the new SDR level.
One question I have for you actually on that specific point is how do you see the relationship between marketing and outbound within that established company, considering, let's say, one way of selling for a long time, so marketing's position is very clear within that company, but now that you're adding a different revenue stream, and yes, outbound needs the support for marketing for either events, webinars or brochures or anything it may be. How do you see that work? Do you have a specific outbound support team, or do you just work by projects? How have you seen that with Salesforce and down the line with other companies?
Yeah, and there's a lot of ways you can do that. Ultimately, it's about the outbound team, like outbound SDRs or BDRs and prospectors. First, sometimes they often live in the marketing team. Sometimes sales. It really depends which leader is most committed to making that program work. Is it the marketing leader? Great. Is it the sales leader, or whoever it is? Like that's where they live for the first couple of years to kind of get off the ground, and then making sure that the metrics of the team, marketing, align with what sales wants. So really, it's making sure that the outbound, and this should be true of inbound leads as well, but like what's being generated through outbound are not just meetings and demos, but it's like qualified opportunities, sales accepted leads. So
revenue. Yeah.
Revenue. Yeah. So that the metrics and comp to that team are really tied, whether marketing owns it or not. Everyone knows the goal is to get opportunities into the hands of salespeople, ones that they want to work. So again, having marketing like a lot of project by project basis, which could be case studies and materials. It's often on either getting case studies done or repurposing case studies into a format that's more outbound friendly.
Yeah.
Like PDFs really don't work very well. Can you guys take this? A lot of case studies are very vaguely written. And for outbound, you need shorter and sweeter content with more detail and concrete details.
Yeah.
So there's lots of ways they work together. Ultimately, it's about having a communication relationship with marketing, having metrics that marketing is tied to metrics that sales cares about, and kind of people, the leadership level, whoever owns this, like they care about it.
Yeah, makes sense. Cool. It's true that it sort of depends on, do you have a VP of lead generation, or do you have a VP marketing and a VP sales, and how those people sort of work together and how their comps are aligned and how their targets are aligned really often sort of shows who's going to be responsible and who's going to take the initiative of bringing that, especially throughout the funnel, not just like at the marketing level, but think of it all throughout the funnel.
Yep.
That's a good point. Cool. Awesome. So I do want to take it back to the systems and the sort of the takeaways. You guys saw this, but the takeaways I had from that were three really important things in my opinion. I'll go straight to the second. I'll come back to the first one, but you need to use tools and even potentially a CRM as a temporary tool until the main system becomes usable or scalable for your team. One of the things that I'm coming across right now and that I've seen people struggle with is, as I said, within an established business, it could take up to a year and even more to have a system that's actually usable for you guys. And that is
Salesforce.com is your main CRM right now?
Yeah, Salesforce is our main CRM. But yeah, it's very tailored to one way of selling. So it does take a long time, especially we're 1,200 plus employees. There's a lot of activity on it. There's a big systems team. There's a roadmap that's existing already. So, how do you get to that system that's usable for all teams and as you make acquisitions, mergers, it can be super tricky to have everybody fit within that CRM. So how do you maneuver that? And oftentimes you won't be able to use the CRM the way you want it to within the first few months and even the first year. So you're going to need something temporary. And what I mean by temporary is it can be just at the lead generation level, right? So your team is working off a HubSpot or X tool as a lead generation tool, something that tailors best to your way of selling and your way of generating leads. And when you push those people to sales, you can come back to your CRM or regardless of the way it's set up, your SDR team and your outbound team should not be hurt by the way the current systems are set up, regardless of how much time it takes to get there. So it should be something we use in the meantime. We build a case study for actually what we want within the main system, the core system, and you can actually do both at the same time. You can be quite involved in the systems conversations and give a lot of feedback as to what we need based on the case study of the tool you're using in the meantime, right? So that's something that can cut efficiency by 30, 40, 50% if you don't have a cadencing or sequencing tool, if you can't analyze your emails or your calls quite well, if you don't have an account marketing or an account-based view of your business, it's really tough to take away anything. So you're not just less efficient, you learn slower than you would using the right tool for you.
Do you have any temporary tools right now? Like, do you have stopgaps? Like, what's your current?
Yeah, so something we use for data that we didn't have before.
I think this one's fallen asleep on me already.
Yeah, she's.
How many people on the call have kids in the background? Or
and how are they struggling with it during meetings? But
we fight. This one will not take naps at all. It's just impossible. So for her, there we go. Thank you. Yeah. So it's like, wow, she's actually taking a nap. I might have to do this more often because she will just like fight you. It's just impossible.
Yeah, it's quite tricky. It adds a layer of complexity to your days of how to maneuver. And for people who don't know Aaron, he has 9 kids.
Yep.
5 of which are your own and 4 adopted, or the opposite way around?
There's 3 bio kids. 2 were from my wife's first marriage, and 4 adopted from, a couple from China, 1 from Florida, 1 from LA. Yeah, a little bit, all kinds of races, ages, and everything else, from 3 years old to 21. This is our youngest, Bellatrix.
Yeah, so it definitely adds a level of complexity to your days and the way you do things, for sure.
No, what are you talking about?
I don't know, and it's okay that way for now.
He's like, I'm okay being.
Yeah, I'm okay that way for now.
For now.
Yeah. So the tools I use in the meantime, for data, I'm going to use something like a Zoom Info or any lead scraper, any information scraper online. Also going to use something for sequencing or cadencing, like a HubSpot. As our Salesforce is not currently, or anything that we currently have is not set up in the way that we can do that quite efficiently. A lot of stuff is automated. We have a lot of tools that are automated, so we have to use those too. I think you just got muted there, Aaron. Am I the only one not hearing him?
Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Sorry, not sorry.
Yeah. So we use a couple things in the meantime just to make sure that our efficiency stays high, and the formula still applies. And whenever that core system is ready for us to work on, we'll just transition quite smoothly, because we'll have the same tools, we'll have the same workflows as much as possible. Obviously, you can't necessarily be perfect, but we'll try to have it as similar as possible.
I'll put myself on mute if I'm not talking, because we also have 4 dogs here as well, of course, because why not?
Why not?
One of them
at that point.
In the background. Yeah,
Cool. Yeah. So I actually went a slide too far there for some reason. Hang on.
Can you hear the dog barking in the background?
There. Yeah, I can, but it's okay. Yeah. We can barely hear it. So yeah, maneuvering systems and tools. What I just said is use a tool as temporary tool until your main system is usable for you guys. So that's the second one. The first one is, some people will have that, some people won't, but I'm lucky enough to have quite a strong management buy-in and relationships already established within the business, where I can have help to drive change, and I can have help to sort of drive a bit of the systems roadmap. So it might be quicker for me to execute on stuff just because I have that. But if you don't have that, the 2 other points are extremely important. Use something temporarily until your systems are scalable, and help, as I said, make the main system scalable for multiple channels and not just one way of selling. Try to be that person sort of guiding the systems team, or guiding the people you work with, to sort of make it scalable and usable for across different teams, rather than using a bunch of fragmented systems and fragmented tools that ultimately you can't really pull data, you can't structure anything. So it's, why would you use that in the first place? So if you don't have strong management buy-in, and you can't really drive change quickly and efficiently, make sure the 2 others are nailed. And Aaron, not sure if you want to add anything onto your own experience and stuff you've seen work as well to drive that change. But for me, those are the main pillars of doing that.
Yeah, a lot of it's kind of startup-y, which is build proof in small doses, build mock-ups, and use that as evidence or for cases for change or for budget or whatever you need, rather than just I don't want to say theory, because theories make sense, but a lot of people just you need to kind of show them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, 100%. Something we've done, I've noticed with one of my colleagues who I get along super well, a systems guy, and he had a hard time understanding what I meant by cadencing, sequencing, getting access to full view. So what worked really well, and something that can be quite a strong takeaway, is I ended up booking a meeting, or I'm not sure who called it. We were 4 or 5 in the room, and I basically did the whole workflow, from getting a lead or workable lead sent my way. How do I work this lead? What's important for us to know? What tools or what features do we need in order to have strong feedback, or to analyze that lead quite well? And how do we reach out? How do we analyze, email performance, call performance, volume, and just across the board, what's important to us and what's the workflow looking like? And I saw his eyes just popping open, and he understood what I meant initially, which is quite difficult to make somebody understand a flow that they haven't really seen or that they haven't really experienced within either this company or a previous company. And now that I really explained why it's important, and I obviously have the case study of Chronogolf to show that, you know, we were doing things really well and we were quite tight in the way we were doing things. And how do we bring that and show this to Lightspeed and to any business actually, and have a strong response and buy-in from other people to execute on that. So that was quite interesting.
All right.
Cool. Yeah, so that's really the main thing for systems. The other really important thing, and people tend to potentially underestimate that, and for me, recruitment, and you touched on it briefly before, but I'm a step too far again. All right, so recruitment or hiring is key, and you know, some people may think, or they may want to hire a bit more junior and spend less early on just to make sure that the cost is not super high, and people are not seeing this as a super high cost initiative that takes a long time to actually show, you know, its revenue and show its success. So some people may think we're going to hire a junior, we're going to mold them into what they need to be. But what I've noticed, and I'm sure you can expand on that, is having benchmark SDRs and senior people who either come from within or come from the outside is actually key in order to scale quickly and to gain traction quickly. You need benchmark people. If you hire a bit more junior and you have to mold people and show how the systems work, how a CRM works, or how to sell, or you know, you're taking people that
What do you mean by a
moldable.
benchmark SDR? Like someone who's already done it somewhere, or
Someone who's done it, someone who is seen by his peers as the benchmark for results, right? So we had somebody in golf, luckily, and Alex, who we hired about the time that we met, who was our benchmark, right? So we tried a new campaign or we tried a new approach, and he would do it. And we would know based on the results coming from this guy that, okay, this is the way to go. And we need to leave this approach aside.
He was like your Navy SEAL type going
exactly.
land on the beach. Yeah,
exactly. And if you don't have that, it's a bit more difficult to assess, because you also need to dive a bit more as a leader and sort of analyze, all right, is he giving me good performance, or, you know, is the guy really the benchmark and all I need to worry about is the effort coming on the outside, and what's the messaging like, because the guy's executing really, really well and he's actually coming up with initiatives. So that's usually the people you're going to need. And yes, you're going to have to pay more. You're going to have to hire a senior, but you're going to see that traction come out much faster than it normally would if you would just take the route of hiring more junior and molding people into becoming senior people. So that, I would say, is one of the most important pillars, of hiring is hire senior. Make sure you don't add a layer of complexity by hiring junior and having to mold people into becoming your benchmark SDRs. If you hire them initially as benchmarks, they're going to give you traction a lot faster. And the ideal thing is to hire senior benchmark people internally, because then systems knowledge, product knowledge, industry knowledge, you know, the entire funnel is a lot easier once you have somebody who's done it internally and who knows everything. And the relationship aspect is also super important. He knows people in account executives. He's got knowledge spread around. He knows how to get stuff done, taking more initiatives. So that's also something that's quite important. If you're able to promote from within, potentially inbound SDRs, or not necessarily SDRs, it can be people from customer success, it can be people in implementation, professional services, whatever it is. If you see profiles that are fitting this sort of hungry, salesy, but well structured, autonomous rep, that's usually the way to go. And I would go by paying more, just so you're gonna see that result much faster.
Good. So, getting a couple questions coming in here. Why don't we take a few minutes to wrap up the slides, and we'll get to the questions.
Perfect. Yeah, I think I have one more.
The showing results before revenue comes in.
Yeah, this guy.
Yeah, this is a good one.
So,
there's a real theme here.
Yeah.
That is, the bigger the company, the more you have to demo your cases.
Yeah.
Whatever your hypothesis, your plans, your budget, your program, your of like find ways to prove it to people, because again, bigger companies, more people need to understand it. More people aren't going to have the time to just need to have more evidence for people.
Yeah.
In general, at a lot of steps.
I agree. It just adds a lot of layers, and it can be super counterintuitive initially, because all you're really trying to do is set up the perfect formula, and you're trying to set up the formula that works for you. But if you need to show early success, and that goes back to my point initially, which was management buy-in. And if people know higher up that it is going to take some time, but you still have buy-in, people trust your execution, and you can bring people that are more senior on board, and people understand that it takes more time to show success. You might maneuver this particular one a little bit better than others would. But in the case that you're really mandated and you need to show constant results, I feel like those three are the main ones that you need to focus on, right? So what is the first thing that your reps are going to do that is going to show some eventual success? It's conversations. How many people can you reach? How long are those conversations as well? So not just volume, but also the complexity of the conversation and how in depth they get. So that's also something that you can see month over month quite grow within the same amount of reps, right? You don't need to obviously add bodies to that, but if you've got 2 reps or 3 reps, you're going to see this growth month over month. And the conversation is usually a good indicator of meetings that are to come and sales accepted opportunities or leads that are going to come forward as well from those conversations. So conversations is usually, and length and volume is what usually indicates that some success is going to come in terms of meetings and opportunities, not necessarily closed ones or deals won, but it usually is a good indicator of something you're doing well or people you're talking to who are responsive.
Progression through the pipeline.
Exactly. So yeah, of course you want to track, to your exact point, where these people progress through the funnel and how those people move away from a conversation to a meeting and eventually close one, and who are you pushing that is the right fit. But that's sort of your second phase, which is based on those conversations. You start to analyze meetings and the meetings growth month over month. You start to see those convos transitioning to meetings. Yeah.
Especially if it's more mid-market or even enterprise, where it might take 6 to 8 months, 6-8 months of sales cycles. And meanwhile, people are spending money and they're like, what are we getting? What are we getting?
Yeah, 100%. And those meetings won't necessarily be always extremely qualified, but what you want is data. You want feedback from your reps. And that goes back to one of the last points I have on the next slide is you want to have a strong account executive SDR relationship, so that whenever you push them a lead, and early on, I set the expectations of the account executives and the management in that department to be very low when it comes to the quality of the leads coming in, because we want to have feedback on how do they compare to the leads you're usually getting, where are they in the funnel compared to where you usually are, and that's sort of going to help us mold that team as well moving forward. Like what profile needs to work on those leads. Yes, we might be pushing those meetings a bit too early, but it's giving us great feedback and great data as to, okay, how we need to mold this account executive team to be able to get those outbound leads as well and be excited about those leads.
All right.
Yeah. And the last one, projected MR, that's a tricky one, because especially if you've been selling one particular way for years or months. I'll take inbound, for example. It's, you're going to use the same conversion rates as sort of a benchmark. You can go a bit lower, but
yeah, I mean, maybe even, it depends, so many variables, but you can cut it in half.
Makes sense.
You have to have a much bigger deal size, conversion rates. It just depends on how you qualify, but definitely will take longer. Might take twice as long. Or
sales cycles longer, but in the optic that you have to show projected results for upper management or even account executives who are still iffy about the quality of leads coming up, this is usually something good to sort of get people excited. And yeah, you don't want to overshoot it and be too optimistic. And I like your idea of sort of cutting the conversion rate in half and making it much, much lower. But the idea behind that is to go month over month, and as you progress and you get closer to that scaling phase, you need to show those sort of 3 metrics, or you can adjust them the way you want. But we're talking to more people, we're booking more meetings, and those meetings are starting to eventually convert into business based on those guidelines. And that's what usually will buy you conversations, buy you time, and allow you to sort of, keep pushing a bit more, maybe potentially adding bodies just based on that projected revenue component.
Yeah, and all that comes to kind of senior team's familiarity with Outbound or lack thereof. If people are more comfortable with, obviously they're going to be able to usually invest faster in things they know.
Yeah.
If they don't believe it's new, they may be more leery about it. Don't know.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. And one KPI that I've noticed is quite a good indicator, and we started measuring that back at Chronogolf, but I feel like it applies really well today again, is the work lead to opportunity rate. And that's an early metric to look at. So what I mean by work lead is how many people are we going after? You having a visit there, Aaron?
My wife just came in. I heard her calling Bella. I muted like, she's on my lap.
Is she actually sleeping, or she's just?
Yeah, no, she's out right now.
That is amazing.
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, she needs it. She just refuses to nap. So you have to pin her down. So it's pretty rare she does this.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
They probably have a lot more energy now that that there's no school. Like, yeah, you might go outside quite often, but it goes back to the house and how to manage that.
Yeah, I find kids never lack for energy. They might just get in the afternoon. They still run around. If they're tired, they just get fussy.
Yeah.
So
I will not want to see Bella in an hour from now, because I think it might escalate.
All right. So we got, let's see here. Break points. Is there a slide? Or is that?
There is one final slide here, which is points around scaling.
Yep.
Don't want to get too much into the future, because I think the really important part is that month 1 to month 10, 12, 18-ish, which is all the points we covered before. But one point I've been stressing this entire hour is how to improve that relationship with account executives, because at the end of the day, those people are closing your leads. They're closing your deals. If you push them leads that they're not happy about, they're going to leave them on the side, and they don't care. Like it needs to align with their comp. Obviously, behavior is driven by the way they're measured and the way they're comped. And if it doesn't align and they don't feel like this is an upside, you're in trouble.
Yeah, and along those lines, when you're newer, it's really important to start with, if you have options, a smaller number of account executives that are more willing and able to kind of work with this. Because some account executives will be in followers, where once you have the process working, so you can work with them. Some might be more the entrepreneurial types, where they'll be able to work with you while the process is still being figured out.
Exactly.
And you want those types to improve it, make it sure it's working before you try to grow it too fast. Yeah,
that's a great point. And getting alignment with them is just it's the most important thing. And it may take some time. And goes back to what I said around, you're going to push them, sorry to use that, but really crappy leads early on. There are going to be leads that
some are good, some are bad.
Some are good, some are bad. The average may not be as good as what they usually get, depending on their channel, but you want to improve that. So you want to make sure they know that your goal is to make their lives as easy as possible and to help them close more revenue, more business at the end of the day. Second thing I found quite interesting, and I'm coming up not against this issue, but I'm coming up against this realization of, once you've gone after your main 1, 2, 3, 4 main segments or subsets of the market, or ideal customer profiles, or profiles you're going after, let's call them that way, how do you expand that? If you've seen that and you've tried that with 100 to 1,000 leads, and you've seen success, and you're seeing this as an opportunity to expand, obviously you have to look at very important things like addressable market. If you're taking a subset of your market and you're looking at your own data and you're noticing that, we're converting these people super well, they're not churning, they're big deal sizes, but the addressable market is not necessarily worth it for outbound to go after that, because it's going to take a while to understand how to sell to them. And if in a matter of month you already use the entire lead base, and that's not necessarily the way to go. So looking at addressable market, product direction as well. So that's my third point. How do you decide where to go next by using addressable market, product roadmap to make sure you're aligned with the product team, and the product team knows, or where the product market team goes, and where your efforts sort of align with that. You don't want to go after a business type or a subset of your product offering that is not going to tailor in a few months, or is not a main focus of the product. You want to make sure your offering is tailored, or your outreach is tailored to where the product direction is going. So I felt that was a very important thing, and it's something I'm realizing is very important for me to keep a really tight relationship with product, to make sure we're aware of all feature releases, we're aware of outages, or where the product is basically fitting within the market.
All right, we got a few minutes for questions. Yeah. There's a couple here. Thanks, Alexis. By the way,
I'm going to stop sharing just now. There you go.
So, for example, Alex had a great question. It said we're in transitioning. They've been singly focused on a type of segment or vertical. Then you expand to a couple of new ones. And up until now, all the prospecting was done by salespeople.
Okay.
So now they're believers, or they want to do an SDR function. And they've got some of the tools. They're kind of like, where do you start? They said they've got Zoom Info, they've got data tool, cadence tool, comp plan. Kind of where do you start?
Yeah.
You start with the first person, right?
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And the thing I like the less about that, and maybe go down with resource available and how they operate, but the salespeople doing prospecting. And I think, Aaron, you were the first one to really vet us against that. And
salespeople shouldn't prospect. Well, more than a little bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe 10 or 20 or 30 targets, partners or key accounts, right? Everything else should be done by prospectors. Yeah.
Exactly. So for me, the answer to that question is, if you have that available and you've noticed a couple segments that work really well for you, that's one great thing. And, sort of trying to expand on that, which was my second point in the last slide. Trying to expand on those segments, or find other competition you're going up against that are good, or geographics or demographics that sort of fit the same mold. But the main point for me is, who do you mandate to do that? And the salespeople, depending on their workload, right? Do they have a lot of inbound leads coming in, or how are they already prospecting, or are you changing the way these people work? I think is the main thing to look at, not necessarily the tactical stuff, but what's behavior going to look like? Who should you mandate to do that? Is it the salespeople themselves, or you're noticing that it can be SDRs that you have in place that are doing inbound, adding a body? I know it's tough these days to open up new budget, but
so it's like deciding who is the owner of that. It has to be one person, and then is it that person, or like who's going to do the full-time prospecting? Is it ideally it's two people?
Yeah,
we need one to start to make the magic happen,
and
that makes it. That kind of who owns it and who's doing what.
And to add to that, if it's a salesperson doing it, an account executive, we have to remember that outbound or prospecting is dissected into two segments, right? You have your SDRs doing the outreach, but you also want to have data fed to these guys. So, Aaron, you call them list builders in your books, and I call them internally coordinators. But if you're mandating salespeople to look for leads, to call them, and to eventually convert them, or you're taken away from the closing segment, you really need to be careful of the skill set that aligns with all main pillars of the execution, because it's the number one reason why your formula works, Aaron, is ownership and accountability of each step of the funnel. Mm-hmm. And if you're driving the behavior in a separate way, I feel like that's going to be tough to handle. So I would really focus on who's responsible for that.
Yep. All right. Kartik asks, is there a specific outbound channel you feel is working much better with the new COVID-19 reality, which LinkedIn has grown tremendously? It's even more so now. That's a
great question. great question. Yes, LinkedIn has worked really well. It depends on your industry. If you're able to get people on the phone is still the way to go. I think the channel is one thing, but the second part of the answer is how do you position your pitch, and do you actually pitch? So my teams are not pitching at the moment. My teams are, we're doing what actually, Aaron, we were on a call a couple of weeks ago and you mentioned the roundtables, like the small people. So what we're doing right now, and I won't expand too much into that, but we're sort of having 3-4 prospects on a call, potentially bringing one of our customers on the call, and we're just sharing ideas, sharing value, and sharing stuff that we've seen throughout the industry, and sending a nice email after that, like a recap email of what we've done, what they could take away as well. And that's the way we nurture those people. So it almost feels like inbound, top of the funnel approach, if you will, for outbound. So
yeah, interesting. So because especially if customers aren't buying, some people might be, but if yours aren't, it's like, how can you educate them? And in this case, he's saying really valuable is connecting some similar companies to each other so it can kind of learn from each other.
Exactly.
Or even commiserate together.
How do you build your top of the funnel considering people are not open to you selling? I think the answer is simple. You have to bring value to what they're doing. You have to help them. You have to be advisory, consultant, and you need to keep focusing on that specifically rather than trying to pitch too early. So channel, analyze what works best for you, what brings the highest response in terms of conversations and people that you're able to talk to within the week. And 2, how do you fill the top of the funnel without being detrimental to the brand and still show a bit of volume at the sales level? I would say that that would be it for me.
Yep. Let's do, I think, 1 or 2 more before we wrap things up. I know thanks for going a few minutes long. Danko, sorry if I get that wrong. Is there a benchmark for outreach, whether it's on email or LinkedIn, for different industries, something we can compare against? So like per month or per 100 prospects to try to gauge, is the SDR performing well? It's tough.
Yeah. How do you see the benchmark for outreach? Are we talking volume-wise or are we talking response-wise?
Well, I think you have to keep in mind that it varies so much by industry, by market. So again, if you're B2B versus like small transactions, but like one in non-COVID times, for B2B SaaS, like 6 to 8 sales qualified leads a month, pretty typical.
So
email, sorry, one more, like LinkedIn, sending 25, if it's a prospect, or 25 connection requests a day.
Yeah.
Another one.
This is a great question. And I think it goes down to knowing if you have one rep, multiple reps, who decides on the initiative. So one thing I've noticed works quite well if you have multiple reps is you have to be the one, or one of your leaders has to be the one deciding on the outreach or deciding on the approach and going with it for the entire team or the entire single team, or if it's 2 SDRs, 3 SDRs, they have to do the same thing so you can then sort of compare their performance based on using the same approach. How do you figure out if an SDR is performing well? Where you compare them to either a benchmark, either other industry numbers, or within a team, you compare them with others. You're going to see that people are better at the top of the funnel, lower than the funnel. So I would say there's no benchmark per se based on, I lack feedback on your industry, your company, your product offering, but by comparing your team members, and if you can't necessarily do that, you can go and try to find industry benchmarks, or you can talk to people within your industry to sort of see how it's going. But I would try to dive yourself, right? So if you ask that SDR for feedback and try to figure out, are they just not getting answers because the market is completely cold and people are not responding, or is there something we can tweak from the approach? So that's where the leadership role is really important, where you need to dive very deep yourself and sort of figure out, what are we doing? Is it working? And if you have the ability to compare with other reps, I would add that layer as well.
Great. Let's see. Last one, Maria asked, interested in the point where you say use specific tools until the main system's ready. What would you say is the key to know when a system's ready to take you to the next step, if you know?
Great question. I said something at some point about helping to build the core system or the core CRM to what it should be for you guys, but other channels as well. Make it scalable or replicable amongst different channels. So what you can do actually to know when it's ready is accompany the person or stay aware of how the core system is evolving for your team. If you can do it for other teams, great. But if you want to do it just for your team, it's fine. But what do you need initially? You need cadencing, you need account-based view. What features are important to you? And basically just track the evolution of that and help make this the core system better. But honestly, I would just try to stay aware. That's quite a simple one for me is you need to know what you need and what features you need. No one's going to tell you what your team needs. Nobody knows it as well as you do. So I would try to document, and something I can look at sharing potentially at some point is document all that you don't have that you would need and the tweaks that you need. Share that with the systems team, and regardless of how that sort of relationship is going along, make sure that you track it well and you understand that you need to know when the cadencing feature is out or when the account-based view is out, and you'll know when you can transition based on the current temporary systems you're working on and how similar the core system compares whenever it's at that ready phase.
Yep. All right, Alexis. Hey, thank you so much. I suppose you can, if he's on LinkedIn, I'm sure his name is in the invite. So again, there's some questions that from impossible to inevitable book. I threw a link into I don't know if it came in the chat or questions. There's an article in there. It's basically how to build an outbound team right the first time. Mm-hmm. And in answering, sorry, it wasn't Alex's question. And I want to appreciate everyone here. I know it's a weird time in the world, so you just keep learning. Just do whatever you can today. Don't buy too many problems out there in the future because no one knows what the future is going to be like. And great job, Alexis. Really appreciate it. And congratulations on getting your ideas, going from like ITES or nothing to something here within just 3 weeks or so.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me. It was great. And hopefully we can do more of them. I'm sure we can dive in more of those subjects even more at some point if we see value in it. So thanks, Aaron.
Yeah. And we'll send the recording out as well to people. All right.
Awesome. Thanks everybody.